Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is Nos Odietis. This episode of Nos Odietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Odietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ray Gibbs through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nicola Dero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going good!
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
And Porter says cheated.
You wanna win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome back to the Mailbag episode for heading into week 3 for Nos Odietis. I am Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is Aaron Campo. How's it going, Aaron?
You know, it's going great, Jeremiah. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
All right.
So, yeah, it's I guess we might as well just jump right into this, huh?
Let's do it. The first question is from Claxon5. Do we not get the golden scarf anymore? Why did Ozzy get a crystal plaque like he was retiring as a CPA?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I actually looked into this. I will say that I noticed that there was signage advertising the Joe Roth golden scarf. So I assume it's still a thing. I wonder if he was supposed to get one. It seemed like there was maybe a few snafus with the pregame yesterday, and things didn't, or not yesterday, on Saturday, and things didn't go quite as smoothly. So I'm not ready to assume that. I did find the whole Ozzy Alonso thing to be a little disjointed. I thought it was really cool. Like, it was great that they brought him back. It was great that they did this whole, media day for him. I thought it was all really well done. And then he just kind of came out on the field and he was presented. He didn't say anything. And I guess his kids were supposed to do scarves up. I don't know if they actually did it, or if, like, I heard there might have been some mic problems, or they were really quiet, or there was something that happened there where it didn't quite go off.
Yeah.
And so that was a I don't know, it was kind of too bad because the whole day felt kind of off, frankly.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I mean, the light show is cool, but aside from that,
I did. Yeah. I have to admit, I thought the light show, like, I did think it was kind of cool. And hopefully, hopefully that's a thing that can be done well.
Done well without being an accessibility problem or.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, fingers crossed on it, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is from G on E. Given the recent news of Pedro de la Vega's injury, it would be interesting to see if there's any data supporting the view that the Sounders seem to be very prone to soft tissue injuries. Is this true, or is it just a bias based on our viewing?
I would say, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe you have run the numbers somehow. This feels like an impossible thing to prove or disprove.
Yeah.
Whether the Sounders are more prone than other teams. I do not blame anyone for feeling like they are or might be.
Yeah.
But I do think that you're always going to pay closer attention to your team's injuries than other teams. And I mean, PDLV has a hamstring injury. It's the most common injury in soccer by far. So
it is the most common injury in soccer. I did do a little bit of research on this, and there's not a lot of good public data, but I was able to talk to some folks that have some more proprietary data. And what they told me is most teams average right around 10 soft tissue injury. I don't know if it was hamstrings specifically, but hamstrings are the most common, but they'll lose about 10 different players, or 10 instances of player loss due to soft tissue injuries throughout the year, which is pretty high. And the Sounders tend to be on the slightly below average. Like they are more prone to injury by a little bit than average. Not enough to be like alarming, but not necessarily good about preventing them either. So I don't know. I don't know what to like. It definitely feels like the Sounders have lost key players at really inopportune times. But I think the other thing that clouds our perception of it is that they've had some kind of freak injuries. Like Albert Rusnak sprains his ankle. Apparently he's never in his life sprained his ankle before. And for him to do it on like the last training session before a game, or, Jordan Morris blows out both ACLs, Christian Roldan gets a concussion. These are not training issues. These are just kind of like freak things that happen. And it seems to be happening to key players. João Paulo blows out. He has an ACL injury. Nuhu got malaria. You kind of just go down the list, and it does feel like they're a little snake bit. And I think that does also cloud our judgment on,
Yeah, I agree.
the other stuff.
I think too, this feels like a very consistent topic that we've discussed over the years on this show. And I have to feel like that's different managers, different training staffs, different training regimens.
There has been a lot of turnover in the training staff, which I don't know if that's, it's probably not helping, but that's probably the area of the team they've had the most turnover. Like I feel like they've gone through like a high performance director almost one a year ever since Dave Tenney left.
Right. So that I think all of that probably does play a role, but I do think that the fact that it has been consistently something that we're talking about and people are concerned about suggests to me that it's just kind of the way it is, especially in MLS where, there's a lot of games. There's a lot of midweek games. It's it's certainly frustrating. Next one is from Dudesby. Would Leiva generate more scoring chances? Leiva might not have the defensive dueling chops that the other central deep line midfielders have, but he seems like a much better passer. We have a strong back line, so why do we need to support them with two more defensive-minded center mids when struggling for goals?
Well, I will say I don't think this is a crazy suggestion. I think if you're going to replace one of the two current ones, I gotta say that it's probably Obed Vargas. Josh Atencio, frankly, he won man of the match. I thought he had a man of the match quality performance. He came very close to scoring two different goals. He's probably the most aggressive passer they have in the central midfield. I don't think Josh Atencio is anything like the problem. I would be interesting to see. At the very least, it would have been interesting to see Leiva come on late for Obed Vargas.
Yeah,
I didn't think Vargas was bad in this game, but that would have been a change I could have gotten behind.
Yeah, I feel like there have been a lot of performances this season, 2 games, where you look at these players and you say, this guy wasn't necessarily the problem here. You can't say that, but they certainly weren't the solution either. And I feel like that's
a fair way of putting it.
How I felt about Vargas in that game.
Yeah, that seems fair. All right, this is from Andrew, and he says Nuhu, Arriaga, and Leiva seem like all three guys have been available for a transfer or a trade for at least a year. Nuhu less so than the other two, with no takers. Is there something the Sounders are doing or not doing that is making it difficult for them to move these players?
Arriaga is an obvious one, right? Because he's on a pretty big cap number and he's not starting. Although, it feels like he's more in the plans this year than he was last year to me so far. Obviously,
he's played both games.
Yeah, injury is certainly a factor there, of course. Yeah. But I don't get the sense they're trying to move Nuhu. I don't
think they're trying to move Nuhu.
I
think that
maybe wish that they were, but right. I don't get the sense they're trying to. And Leiva, to me, him going out on loan last year just felt more like we want this kid to get some playing time consistently.
Yeah.
Then they're actively trying to move him. Arriaga I think the Sounders would probably like to move him, but I also think that he clearly has some value to them. Like, it's not like he's just sitting there collecting a paycheck and not contributing at all. So I don't think they are necessarily feeling any pressure to move him, would be my guess. And, it takes two to tango, right? So if teams aren't looking for a center back like that on that kind of a cap hit, it's going to be tough to move him.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate. That I'm sure the Sounders would be willing or happy to consider moves for all three players, but I also think there's no reason for them to look to get rid of them either. They all have useful skills. None of them are tying their hands in ways that make it hard to make moves that they want to make. Like, as far as I know, they still have cap space to go out and do something. Arriaga has been a useful player. I'm glad that they didn't trade him. It would have been interesting. It would have been an interesting situation if they had traded him, because they've needed him the last 2 games. So I think it's kind of a matter of other teams might be interested but aren't willing to hit their price point.
Right. Yeah. I think right now too, I mean, until the transfer window closes, I'm sure teams would kind of like to keep their options open. Yeah. I think if we get closer to the end of the transfer window and the trade window closing, teams that haven't been able to fill, any holes that they may have at center back on the transfer market, maybe that's when they start looking at making a trade. And hopefully by that point, the Sounders will be a little healthier and maybe, they can entertain offers that right now wouldn't be super attractive.
Yeah.
This one is from the Joshua. When do we think our scoring woes from last year are the same for this year? 20-something shots on goals, no score. Is this the same issue as last year? Is this something else? Not to be pessimistic, but this feels like last year. Who can score? Who can score off the bench? 1 loss and 1 tie at home is not inspiring. If we lose next game, which looks like a hard game to tie, let alone win, what should the team do?
Yeah, this is the $1 million question, right? How do you get the team scoring? I think it's a little early to say. I actually asked Schmetzer this almost exact question today, and I found his answer to be to pass the smell test at the very least, which is, last year the problem was that they became unbalanced. They were either too right side heavy or too left side heavy, and this year they've been a little more balanced, and the attacks are coming in from both wings. They're doing the whole, inside out sort of build. The attacking patterns seem to be there. They're getting into dangerous spots. They are, getting a lot of penalty box entries. They're doing a lot of the tactical stuff that you want them to do. It's just not happening as crisply and as efficiently as you'd like. So, 2 games in, I'm not ready to say these are the same problems, but I'm also not going to tell anyone that they can't feel that way when it does feel a lot like last season. And so until the Sounders start scoring, it's going to feel like last season. So I don't really have I don't have an antidote for that other than to say your frustrations are justified.
Yeah, I think the frustrations are justified. I think, to me, the thing that makes me more confident or optimistic, I guess, that it's not the same issues as last season is that the roster is a lot different. And, there's no Nico Ladero. There's Pedro de la Vega, although,
right,
not for a little bit, but we haven't seen Rusnak yet. There's Moskovsky. Right. So there are big changes. The team, I feel like, is playing a little bit differently than they did last year, especially in the attacking phase. I think, too, that maybe I'm misremembering. I don't know. For me, this year looks like good process, not great results in the final third. Mm-hmm. Whereas last year, it looked like both were lacking. Both the process, tactically trying to get into good positions, create chances, that felt futile. And that hasn't really felt like the case. It just has felt like things are just a hair off in the final third. And, I think that that's not uncommon for teams early in the season.
Right. Yeah. It's not, you look at the table of teams, and, there's a handful of teams that have scored a bunch, but basically the entire league has scored between 0 and 3 goals. You have Miami with 8, you got DC with 5. You've got Portland with 5 and Salt Lake with 4. And then everyone else is 0, 3, 2, 1. So it's, and the Delta, it's like that's one big game. essentially is what I'm saying. Like the Sounders go out and score 3 against Philadelphia, and all of a sudden, they're mid-table in terms of scoring, and it doesn't look so bad. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm not at 2 games in where you haven't had 4/7 of your starting spine. Feels a little early for me as this is my job. This is what I don't blame a fan for getting frustrated and saying, oh, this is all the same thing. But I feel like I have to look at this a little bit more critically, and I just don't see, the repetition. Other than the results feel very similar, but like the process still doesn't feel, quite as redundant or repetitive.
I think too. I mean, you can look at the way the team looked the first couple of games last year. They looked great. They looked like the best attacking team in MLS history, and that didn't last very long. So hopefully it's the same kind of situation this year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that. Yeah. Scott Chupak, he says, it seems that for an American homegrown to make an MLS roster, they generally have to play defense, wingback, or defensive midfielder. But I imagine that if you are a player good enough to be at the top of the Sounders Academy, you've probably been the 9 or 10 for your teams throughout your life. So how does that reconcile? Do academies convert their best players to defenders so they can play MLS? Or are Americans with 9 or 10 skills just destined to not advance beyond the USL level?
I mean, I think it's more that Americans with the skills to play those positions at a high level get swooped up before they play in MLS. There's a lot of American attacking players playing in Europe,
or before they become stars,
right?
Like they may start out in MLS, but they move on. And
attacking players they're harder to come by. Teams are willing to spend more on them. There are all sorts of reasons that attacking talent they peak earlier. So teams want to make moves for them a little earlier in their career, typically. And I do think that teams generally need, if you're a homegrown central midfielder, most teams need more midfielders than they need strikers. If you're, a center back, most teams probably need more center backs than out and out strikers, out and out attacking players. I also think that MLS teams are more likely to, homegrown players are not going to be stars a lot of the time very early in their careers, and because of the sort of the restrictions on rosters and the incentives that teams have to spend big on a few positions, you're more likely to want to make a designated player a striker or a creator. I mean, that's probably the single biggest factor right there.
I think it's that for an American number 9 or 10 to break through, they're probably going to have to beat out a expensive international player, and that's just tough to do. And that said, Jordan Morris, it does bear repeating, Jordan Morris is a homegrown player, and, he's currently the Sounders starting number 9. So it's, I think the reality is that there's not that many, homegrown from any academy, right, that are, so it's like,
And if you look at Sounders strikers of the last few seasons that weren't Raul, you've got Jordan, you've got Will Bruin, you've got Misovsky. These are, players that came up through that system, right? So,
right.
It's not unheard of, but I think that it's just harder. It's harder to break through as an attacking player in MLS because that's where teams are spending the money, I think.
Yeah.
All right, 2 more questions. This next one is from Boomstick315. Is parity possible if the league continues to grow? MLS roster spend has roughly doubled every 5.5 years. If MLS's growth rate continues, that would mean median roster spend would catch up with the likes of Ligue 1 within a decade, assuming they continue their current growth rate. That would be roughly $50 million a year median. The big 3 in Mexico can spend nearly double that today. Even if the median of Liga MX is far lower, can MLS ever be a league that matches its level of ambition while also keeping the current level of parity? Or is world football too unequal to catch up to the big clubs without creating big clubs?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think there's two issues here, right? There's one is essentially what he's asking is, can MLS create super clubs, and can MLS be a top league in the world? And I don't necessarily think that for MLS to be one of the top leagues in the world, it needs to have super clubs where they're spending 3, 4, 5, 10 times what some of the poorer teams are doing. Now, if that's what happens, yeah, there's going to be a lack of parity, right? Yeah. If we get to a point where Inter Miami is spending $500 million on their roster, and there's a bunch of teams that are only spending $50 million on their roster, yeah, you're going to see the parity thing disappear pretty quickly. But I think what MLS is trying to do is keep that exact thing from happening. Like, we might be in a world where, Inter Miami or New York City FC or LAFC or heck, the Sounders or Atlanta, maybe they're spending $100 million on their roster. But the reality is that if they're doing that, the cheapest teams are probably going to still be spending 50. And I don't see any reason why there won't be parity in a league where the gap between the richest and poorest teams is only 2x.
Yeah. I think too that you are much more likely to see, rather than MLS abandoning parity, you're likely to see more cost certainty start to be built into the top European leagues. It's really appealing to club ownership to be able to control costs. I don't think that that's a good thing on a lot of levels.
But that's something that's what the whole Super League is kind of about.
Right. Financial fair play was an attempt to do that to some degree. Basically, Europe tried to do what you're asking about here with financial fair play, with keeping the super clubs, allowing those clubs to sort of have their built-in advantages because of the revenues they were creating, while also preventing other clubs from going bust and all that stuff. And it doesn't work. It's not a good system. So I think that we are much more likely to see in the next 5 to 10 years a lot more, maybe not hard salary caps, but something like it that brings a little bit more parity than we are to see MLS go in the opposite direction. And I think I personally think that that's bad. I mean, my least favorite thing about MLS, even though I've learned to accept it and understand why it was at one point necessary, is the enforced parity and the inability of clubs that create more revenue and have more resources to spend in line with that revenue and those resources. I think it's a bummer, but it is what it is, right? So I would love for there to be a reality where MLS teams could spend as freely as they wanted, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, so we're going to end on this one, and I don't know, maybe this is too much of a bummer note to end on, but we'll do it anyway. This is obviously submitted a while before Saturday's game, but D Height wants to know, what should Pedro de la Vega's nickname be? His whole name is 6 syllables. Peppo, and Peppo is actually what his nickname is, as far as I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, if that's what his nickname is, I think that's a good one to stick with. I just like saying PDLV. I think it's fun to say.
Yeah, I do too.
So I think that one works. Yeah, I don't know. The last time I came up with a nickname, it ended up being kind of embarrassing to me after a while. So
was that Honey Badger?
Yeah. I don't know.
Isn't that amazing how that stuck? That like really stood the test of time, though.
Yeah, I guess I could take credit for the Brad Evans sheriff thing, but I didn't come up with a nickname. I just voted for him for sheriff. So but that was after the Honey Badger thing. So, and that one doesn't bother me. That one I think is funny. But yeah, I'm retiring from the nickname game though.
Fair enough.
I'm just going to go with Pepo. Is Pepo?
Peppo.
Like, that's nice. That's fun to say. Or PDLV. That's probably what I'll usually call them.
Yeah. That one feels a little bit more like a Pacific Northwest name. But all right. Well, just as a reminder, if you like this type of format show and you want to get involved, you've got to become a member of our Discord. To become a member of our Discord, you got to be subscribing to Sounder at Heart at the supporter level or above. We'll get you into our Discord. You can ask questions. We're going to try to do these every week. If we have questions every week, we'll do them every week. I think we keep toying with where we're going to put this show. I think we'll probably keep it on the public feed as sort of like, hey, look at all the fun we're having over on Discord. Come join us. But all that said, thanks for listening. I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Aaron Campo. This is No Sadietes, and we will catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one.